Is this situation under control?
I think you're referring to the fuel situation, and it's stabilising. Look, there's enough fuel in the country. There always has been. What we've seen in the last few days is trouble in terms of getting that fuel to the petrol forecourts. I think in most parts of the country it is certainly seeing signs of stabilisation, but I think it's also right as a precaution that the government has asked the military to help. I think that starts from Monday. I think that's the right measure to take to make sure people have all the confidence that they need.
As a precaution, I mean, have you tried to get petrol any time over the last week?
Well, I personally haven't tried, but my wife and my members of my family have. And of course, depending on where you live, it hasn't been easy. There have been queues. I've also heard, again, whether it's from family and friends and others, that the situation is stabilising in most parts of the country. And the measures that have already been taken in terms of relaxing some of the rules around HGV drivers and relaxing the competition rules so there can be better coordination between the fuel companies, I think these are all helping. But it is absolutely right, I think, that the government thinks about what more can be done because, people want the situation to go completely back to normal as soon as possible. It's heading in the right direction. But if the military can help, then we should certainly take up that offer of help.
Yeah, but the problem is, what the government never seems to accept over the last week is that this is absolutely chaotic. You can drive round and never see a petrol station that's open.
Look, I think government ministers of the last few days have accepted the situation as it is, but what they have done is responded to that in every way that we possibly can. And it's also important, I think, for people to know that there's never been an actual shortage of fuel in the country. There is enough fuel for everyone. And I can understand why people, perhaps seeing the scenes on whether it's through media or social media and reacting in the way that they have, I think that's been a perfectly normal reaction, but I think it's worth reassuring people that there is enough fuel in this country. The situation with drivers is improving, and now if the military are needed to help, they will be ready to do so from Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, saying the military's there as a precaution. I mean, you've got soldiers on UKSB given 30 minutes notice to move at the moment, to head from their barracks to start on this job. I mean, that's an urgent situation. Any soldier will tell you that.
Well, my understanding is that the military won't be directly involved until Monday, and the reason for that is to give some time for some of the extra training that's going to be required. It also gives time to coordinate with the fuel companies and with others, and I think that makes sense. But I think it's also really important that we can actually call on the military at a time like this for that extra support, to give that confidence and have this as a measure that's there as a precaution, because as I say, the situation is stabilising. No one's going to pretend it's completely back to normal. I wish it was, but it's getting that way. But I think having the military available in this way is a really sensible thing to think about.
What about these foreign drivers being brought in? I mean, obviously the move to get several thousand in, 5,000 I think it was, I mean, hasn't seemed to have gone down very well with drivers on the continent. Why is this move, do you think, to get 300 people temporary visas, emergency visas immediately? Why is that going to make a difference?
Of course, everyone knows, I mean, this is about a shortage in HGV drivers in particular. I think there's a shortage of around 70,000 drivers in total in the UK. By the way, in Europe, in mainland Europe, there's a shortage of some 400,000. So this is an international problem, not just something in the UK. And it's right that we try to find ways to get more drivers. And if that means
forgive me for jumping in, but if it's a continent-wide shortage, why on earth do you think we're going to be able to tempt them over to this country when we've obviously kicked a lot of them out?
Of course, there's competition for drivers, and that's taking place throughout Europe. But it is important that we try to do what we can. And I am confident, actually, that with the temporary visa changes that have been announced, that we will get more drivers. But that's not the long-term answer to this. We obviously need more drivers trained to do this. And some of the measures that have been taken in terms of how that training is done, how quickly the training process can proceed. I mean, these these are all the right measures. But in the short term, I think it is right to try and see if we can get more drivers. And I think that will work.
Why hasn't anything been done on this sooner? I mean, we've known this was coming. There was a shortage of drivers pre-pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic's made things worse. Some argue Brexit has made things worse. And we've had a shortage on supermarket shelves for some considerable time. So why wasn't action taken prior to this?
Well, there has been action that's been taking place, as I understand it, for months and indeed for well over a year. But the one thing no government controls is how labour markets move exactly. We all know that this, for example, has been tied up with the pandemic across the world. But if you look at the impact on Europe and the lockdowns that were had and the different types of support for the labour markets from different governments in Europe, it's had an impact that isn't entirely always predictable. But as this problem has got worse in the last few weeks, and the government has responded in the way it has with some of the measures that we've just talked about, I'm confident that they will make a difference. And you started off again asking about the military, and I think it's right in a situation like this that we can call on the military for this type of support. And as I say, that will be ready from Monday, and I think that will further help to stabilise the situation and give more confidence. And that's the important thing.
Can I ask you about women and girls and their safety in the UK? The Prime Minister has said he finds it infuriating the police's failure to tackle violence against women. Is this a police issue? I mean, is there a fundamental problem with how police deal with this? I mean, you were Home Secretary. You've dealt with the police, in great detail.
Yeah, I think that the police are there to protect us. And what I saw as Home Secretary, day in, day out, the police were doing an amazing job looking after the British people, protecting people. I saw things that they did, quite heroic things that saved lives, countless number of lives, across the UK. But it's because of that, because they're there to protect us, that this crime, this appalling crime, has had the shock that it has across the country, and rightly so, because no one would have thought that a police officer would be capable of this, and that is why I think it is right that there needs to be reform. I couldn't tell you today exactly, I wish I could, exactly what that reform should be. I think this should be looked at properly and carefully, and the police do need to be part of that reform.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that reform, we're talking about a societal issue here, aren't we? One of the papers this morning talking about exposure, flashing, as we always used to call it, being endemic in this country now, and obviously that potentially being, a precursor to other offences. I mean, what do we need to do in society to change the attitude of those people who are putting women and girls at risk?
Look, I don't think there's one single answer to that, but it is a very, very fair question, I think, for us to ask ourselves as a society. And you may know, a few months back, before I came back into government, I did a whole piece of work and research into child sexual abuse and exploitation, and that includes children, obviously boys and girls, that were being abused by adults. And there are many reasons for the increase in that abuse, and one of those that I identified, and there is more action being taken on this, is the online nature of your sexual material, whether that's illegal pornography or even how boys in particular can access legal pornography. Now, the government's online harms bill, the work that we're proposing there will make a difference. But, that's just one thing that I think that we need to take more action on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are you of the view that, which we've heard in the past when it comes to these sensitive issues, a lot of people say we need to lock it away, you should be banning this pornography or banning all this sort of stuff and putting it in a box. Is that the right approach, or do we actually need to open it up a bit more so we at least are having discussions, we're talking about feelings, we're talking about behaviours and intimate behaviours and what is right and wrong and acceptable?
I think actually it's all of that, and obviously illegal pornography is already by definition banned, but what is happening is more work to make sure that those predators that try to access that kind of online activity are prevented from doing so. There is an issue around legal pornography access by underage people, and the government's proposals in the online harms white paper to have some kind of age-related access to that, I think, is a step in the right direction. But there are so many things here that many of them in train. I think the government has taken some excellent action on this. For example, the strategy that was published this summer on violence against women and girls, the Straighter, Safer Streets funding, to having more police officers on the street. I mean, all this is about making everyone feel safer. And I think after this terrible crime and how the whole nation, rightly so, has been impacted by it, we do need to think again and redouble our efforts.
Where does it leave you you've got girls, I believe. Where does this leave you as a father? I mean, with the idea of, I don't know how old your children are, but even when they're teenagers or early 20s or whatever, I mean, where does that leave you in considering how safe they are, just going out, going to see friends, going to the pub? I mean, what concerns you as a human being in this?
No, I'm a proud father of 4 children, and that includes 3 girls, including 2 teenage girls, and I think as any parent in the country, that over the last few days, especially after this verdict, I think we would have all thought about our own families and what needs to be done. But I think I'm just with every other parent in the country, thankful for our police in the work that they do to keep us safe, including my daughters and everyone else, but also asking about the reforms the police can make, and asking them to show the leadership that is necessary to make those reforms. And I think they will be coming forward with reforms, but working with the government, I think we can learn from this and make things better.